Hi. I know. It's been a while. I am extremely displeased with how long I have been away from YouTube. The last couple of weeks I got COVID and then I went through this like depressive episode and then my workload was just like kicking my ass. Speaking of depression, since I kind of went through a rough patch recently, I thought it would be fitting to explore my mental health journey. Just kind of talk about what that's been like for me and reflect as somebody who's gone through 5 different therapists and 3 different antidepressant prescriptions and an eating disorder. So let's walk it all the way back to the beginning. Obviously, like, I don't remember very much. And like, here's the thing with making this video. I don't remember everything. And yes, I've been journaling for most of my adult life, but like memory is this really weird thing. And I feel like you can look back and frame something that happened in any particular way that you would like. And as much as I would like to be objective and say that everything that I remember from my past is 100% true, that's like just not possible. I will do my best. It's really hard for me to figure out like generally how I was feeling within any period of time in my life. There's a disclaimer. The other disclaimer is that I am not a therapist. I am not a mental health professional. I am just somebody who has been mentally ill for several years and therefore has educated herself about it and had her own experiences. If you have been going through some shit, and let's be honest, we all are, because being alive is not easy, go talk to a doctor, go find yourself a therapist. There is hope for you yet. I think I've always been kind of a sad, angsty, emotional person. Like when I was a teenager, I would shut myself in my room and listen to sad music and go on Tumblr. And I feel like that like says something about my psyche, maybe. I remember when I was like in high school, I would say shit like, "Mom, I'm sad," and she'd just be like, "You're fine." I remember specifically asking her once in senior year, I was like, "Can I go to therapy?" And she was like, "No, you're fine." I think I've always just kind of like struggled with being a little bit on the sad side. I don't know if I was like necessarily depressed anytime in my childhood, although it's like definitely possible. I would say my first experience with depression was after my first breakup, which was basically like around fall of 2017. And then I went to college and then it got even worse because not only was it a transitional time, but I was kind of disappointed with the way that college turned out. I remember like walking around campus all day, like being on the verge of tears. Even though I was very, very depressed at that time, I was still extremely functional. I still went to work, I still went to my classes, I still got shit done. My depression has never stopped me from participating in society. I would still do the things that I had to do. I just was really fucking sad while I did all of it. So definitely a very high functioning depressed person, and I've always kind of been like that. While planning for this video, I went so far as to scroll back in my iCal and actually try to find the exact time that I started going to therapy. So the first appointments I found were in October of 2017, and I think school started in September of 2017. So I went to my school counseling center and I was just like, I need help. I need to talk to someone. And so they did intake sessions for me. And then they scheduled my real first appointment with a therapist 2 weeks after my intake. I was like, 2 weeks? I have to wait 2 weeks to see somebody? Like, I'm not okay right now. Like, I don't think you understand. Like, I can't wait. But I did wait. Here's the thing about school counseling centers. They're severely understaffed. At least mine was. I mean, I don't know anyone who went to any school that had like a positive experience in their counseling center. Basically, if I wanted to see an actual licensed therapist, I would have to wait a really long time between sessions because they're a lot busier, because they are like the real thing. But if I chose to see one of the interns, I could actually have sessions more frequently, maybe more like once a week or once every week and a half. And I was like, you know what? I'm not doing well. And so I think I need to see someone more frequently. And so that's what I chose. I actually really liked my therapist. He's the only male therapist I've ever had. He was like a young dude. So in a way, I feel like he just understood me more just from like an age standpoint. Here's what I remember from that therapist. Something I've always struggled with is feeling like I'm too dramatic. And I remember saying that to him and he was like, I don't think you're too dramatic. You feel what you feel and your emotions are valid. I don't know, something like that. I just remember him telling me I wasn't dramatic and I was like, oh, okay, that's cool. I remember him telling me it's lonely at the top. I remember him saying that I wanted to be done before I even started because I think I struggled so much with uncertainty that I just wanted to reach the destination. The last session I had with him was just like reflective. Whenever we had sessions, he felt like we would go forward and then we would stop. And then we would go forward and then we would stop. It was easy for us to get stuck in our work. It was really weird like saying goodbye. It was like, oh, this is our last session. This is the last time we're ever gonna talk to each other because like how the hell would we ever cross paths again? And also you were my therapist, so if you see me, you have to pretend like you never knew me. So there's just like this person who you have spoken very intimately with and then you're just like, goodbye. I don't know, it's like, it's kind of a weird feeling when you walk away from that session and you're just like, oh, time to move on with my life. So I saw him for 2 full semesters, basically my entire freshman year, fall and spring. Because it is a school counseling center, there were limited sessions that I could do, and then my therapist had to request more for me, but then I got them. So I did fortunately have a lot of sessions with him throughout that time. So after my freshman year of college, I got a new therapist through my insurance. It was the only therapist in my college town that was actually covered by my insurance, so it was just kind of like, well, I guess this is the person I'm seeing, unless I wanted to pay more out of pocket. Unfortunately, I didn't really like her. I feel like I would just talk about an issue and then she would say something. I'd just be like, okay, and then we'd stop talking about it. I feel like it was just really hard for me to figure out what to talk to her about, and so I would often end our sessions early because I would just be like, I literally don't know what to say anymore. I talked to my later therapist about this therapist, and she said that it kind of sounded like she's more of a solution-based therapist, which means you like bring her an issue and she's just like, this is the way to solve it, and then you just kind of like move on with your life. That's like typically something that works better for men, is what she said. When I started seeing this therapist, I developed some sort of disordered eating. It wasn't an area of expertise for her, and so she really encouraged me to go to a specialist, which I didn't want to do because it wouldn't be covered by my insurance. Fast forward a little bit to May 2019, which was after spring semester of my sophomore year. My therapist recommends that I take medication. Now, I have an entire video about my experience with antidepressants, so if you want to watch that, I will link it below. And it also happens to be my most popular video. There's like a pretty extensive comment section where people share their experiences and ask me questions, and I do my best to answer them. At this time, I started taking Lexapro, and I finally went to an eating disorder treatment center. I was not a happy camper when I first started going there. During my intake session, they informed me that I would have to take a very extensive amount of medical tests, because when you have an eating disorder, it fucks up your physical health in a lot of ways, and that's something that they have to evaluate to properly treat you, because a lot of times you don't even know how your lack of eating has affected your health. I had to get my blood drawn, I had to get my heart tested, I had to get my bone density scanned and all this stuff. Everything was actually fine. I did find out I have osteopenia, which sucks. The first eating disorder therapist that I saw was an art therapist. And again, I have made a separate video about art therapy and my experience with it, so if you'd like to hear more about that, I will also link that in the description. I started going to her in summer of 2019. I really liked art therapy. So they were like, oh, you're artsy, why don't you do art therapy? And I was like, yeah, sure. But what they failed to inform me was that my art therapist was leaving in a few months. They got me attached to a therapist that was going to leave within like a very short amount of time. So unfortunately, I only really saw her for that summer, which sucked because I did really like her. It was really cool just like going to sessions and just playing with paint or clay or something. And it's so sad because it's been so long since I made a habit of sketching regularly. When I was in school, I would always sketch during class. The teacher would be lecturing and I would just kind of doodle or whatever. But then the pandemic hit and that was like something that I just completely stopped doing. I'm so sorry to my art therapist. I have failed you. There was only one other art therapist at that clinic and she was really expensive, so unfortunately I just kind of ended up going with a family and marriage therapist. She was okay. I remember it always just kind of going back to like, I hate school. I just like feel like we were just going around in circles because it was like, yeah, I hate school, but I also wasn't going to quit school. I kind of saw her up until the pandemic hit. She also moved. That's the issue with like college towns. Especially if they're young, you can't really count on them to stay in the area for that long. In August of 2020, I was like, okay, it's time to find a new therapist. What I did was research all of the therapists that were covered by my insurance and look them up on Psychology Today and look at their specialties. I'll give you some keywords to look up. So this is under treatment approach and types of therapy. Humanistic. Humanistic method takes a positive view of human nature and emphasizes the uniqueness of the individual. Interpersonal. So your therapist helps you identify the issues and problems of interpersonal relationships. Psychoanalytic, which is when you learn the conscious and unconscious wishes that drive their patterns of thinking and behavior, so that when you make the unconscious conscious, you can make more educated choices about how you think and act. Psychodynamic, which is more deeply understanding one's emotions and other mental processes, and just kind of like trying to figure out how you relate to everyone in your life. I'm really no expert. I just Google a lot of stuff and do a lot of research. I started going to her and I've only ever seen her through telehealth. I think a lot of people dislike telehealth therapy, but honestly, I really like it because I can just roll out of bed or stay in bed. Who says I have to leave my bed for therapy? And just hop on my computer and talk to my therapist. I don't have to get in a car and drive somewhere. I don't have to leave my home. I don't even have to change. I think it's a godsend for mentally ill people. It's like very low effort therapy. My therapist always offers a lot of different solutions to whatever it is I'm struggling with. She also gives me a lot of resources, like she'll send links to articles and like books or meditations on YouTube that she finds if she thinks I'm gonna like it. In the last 2 years, I have very inconsistently gone to therapy. I was pretty much extremely consistent with going to therapy. 2 weeks ago, I went back to therapy for the first time in 6 months. which is definitely like the longest time I've taken off from seeing a therapist. If I hadn't seen her for that long, it must have seemed like I was doing really well. I was definitely like riding the high of having moved to New York City, been in this exciting new place and got a new job. I think what kind of happened is that I was working a lot and not really getting out, and I was dealing with some health issues. The difficult part about working from home, even though it's like really convenient and flexible in a lot of ways, is that you just don't see people and you just don't talk to people, and you really don't get that human interaction that you need that makes you stay sane. As much as I would like to be this like New York City career woman that's like hustling and working all the time, I simply cannot for my mental health. And that's why I unfortunately had to step away from YouTube for so long. God, I just was not doing well. And I think it's really hard because it felt like a step back. Because once I moved here, I was like, you know what? I've got this great job. I've got so many opportunities, and I'm young and the world is my oyster, and I have such a great support system because I've got friends here. Everything is like good for the first time in my life. And the fact that I've found myself back to this sadness was really devastating for me, honestly. I was like, have I not made any progress? Literally since 2017. Like, I have been going to therapy for years and taking medication for years, trying to dig myself out of this hole. And I'm just like right back where I started. It's really easy to feel like you've made no progress, but also like I've gone to a lot of therapy sessions and I've put a lot of work in, and I've learned a lot about myself and how to cope and the things that I am supposed to do when I feel this way. And I don't think it's ever gonna be easy. And I think it's unfortunately something that is always going to come back. And so I know that this is something that I'm going to have to deal with for the rest of my life. When you reach rock bottom, as awful and terrible as it is, you learn to appreciate when you're happy, and you really see things in a different way. As difficult as it is a big part of who I am and why I am so passionate about certain things, like my art and making content and sharing things in the hopes that it helps other people. And so even though it's really shitty that it's something that I've had to go through and something that millions and millions of other people have to go through, I'm glad that it's made me the person I am now. It's hard to like wrap this in a neat little bow and try to be positive about it, because depression is inherently like a really fucked up thing. Like, you just feel an exaggerated sadness for literally no good reason. It's terrible that that is a thing that exists. Anyways, that's my video. That's my mental health journey. I went on so many tangents and talked about a lot of different shit. Let me know if you have any thoughts in the comments below. And I promise that my next video will not be so far away. Okay, I'm gonna go. Thanks for watching. See you later. Bye.